How the first humans crossed an ocean without boats. Imagine standing at the edge of the known world more than 1 million years ago. Behind you lies a landscape of forests, rivers, volcanoes, and dangerous animals. Ahead of you is something your ancestors have never conquered: open sea. There are no maps, no sails, no carved wooden canoes, no knowledge that another island waits beyond the horizon. And yet somehow early humans crossed. They reached islands that had never been connected to the Asian mainland, even when Ice Age sea levels were at their lowest. They entered a world separated by deep water, and they did it hundreds of thousands of years before modern humans appeared in the region. The evidence is written in stone. On the Indonesian island of Flores, archaeologists discovered simple stone tools buried beneath layers of ancient volcanic sediment. Some are about 1 million years old. Whoever made them had reached an island surrounded by deep ocean channels. That discovery created one of the greatest mysteries in human evolution. How did the first humans cross an ocean without boats? To understand the problem, we must travel back to Pleistocene Southeast Asia. During the Ice Ages, enormous quantities of water became trapped in glaciers. Global sea levels fell, exposing broad plains between many islands. Present-day Sumatra, Java, and Borneo became connected to mainland Asia, forming a giant landmass known as Sunda. Animals and early humans could walk across much of this region without ever seeing an open ocean. But the dry land ended near Bali. East of Bali lay a deep channel, now called the Lombok Strait. Even during the coldest ice age, when shorelines extended far beyond their modern positions, this channel did not disappear. The sea floor was too deep. Beyond it stretched a chain of islands, including Lombok, Sumbawa, Flores, Sulawesi, and Timor. This island world is called Wallacea. It was a biological border. To the west lived many familiar Asian mammals. To the east, the animal communities began to change. Elephants, tigers, rhinoceroses, and apes could not simply walk across the deep water. Neither could humans. Yet stone tools showed that a human population was living on Flores by roughly 1 million years ago. Fossil teeth and part of a jaw found at Meta Menga show that small-bodied humans were on the island about 700,000 years ago. Much later, another site called Liang Bua preserved the remains of Homo floresiensis, the famous small human species, often nicknamed the Hobbit. Their ancestors had somehow crossed the barrier. The travelers were probably not Homo sapiens. Our species did not yet exist in its modern form. The best candidate is an early human population related to Homo erectus, a species that had already spread across large parts of Asia. Homo erectus could walk long distances, make stone tools, cooperate in groups, and survive in many environments. But there is no direct evidence that these early travelers could build true boats. That is why some researchers believe the first crossing may have been an accident. Picture a violent tropical storm striking the coast of an ancient island. Rain turns rivers into torrents. Trees collapse. Tangled roots, branches, vines, and mats of vegetation are ripped from the land. Floodwater carries them toward the sea. Animals trapped on this floating debris are swept offshore. This happens in nature. Reptiles, rodents, and other animals have reached islands by rafting on vegetation. After hurricanes or tsunamis, enormous natural rafts can drift for days or even weeks. Now imagine that a small group of early humans was caught in the same disaster. Perhaps they were gathering shellfish beside a river. Perhaps they were sleeping on a low floodplain. Perhaps a tsunami arrived with almost no warning. The water surged inland, tore apart the forest, and dragged people out to sea on a mass of trees and vegetation. They would not have chosen the journey. They may not even have understood what was happening. The coast would shrink behind them. The current would pull them away from everything familiar. Salt spray would cover their skin. Waves would break over the raft. The sun would burn during the day, and darkness would erase every landmark at night. Most accidental voyages would end in death, but one did not. Ocean currents and wind may have carried survivors toward another island. The crossing may have been shorter than the modern distance because Ice Age shorelines extended farther into the sea. High mountains or volcanic peaks might have been visible from one island to the next under clear conditions. Still, the travelers had to cross deep water. There was no hidden land bridge. The route to Flores probably involved several stages. Early humans could have moved from Java or Bali to Lombok, then through Sumbawa, and eventually to Flores. We do not know whether the journey happened in a single generation or through multiple accidental crossings over thousands of years. We also do not know what carried them. A vegetation raft is one possibility. A cluster of fallen trees is another. They may have clung to floating bamboo or used simple bundles of wood. Such objects would not necessarily qualify as boats, and they would leave almost no archaeological evidence after 1,000,000 years. It is also possible that early humans possessed more control than we assume. They may have pushed logs into the water. They may have noticed that bamboo floated. They may have crossed short channels while holding branches or sitting on crude platforms. Skills like these could develop without the construction of a carefully shaped canoe. But the evidence cannot tell us whether the crossing was planned. A stone tool can survive for 1,000,000 years. A raft made from vines and wood cannot. The greatest challenge came after landfall. Reaching Flores once was not enough. A single individual could not create a lasting population. Even a tiny group would face inbreeding injury disease and simple bad luck. For humans to remain on the island, either a reasonably large mixed group had to arrive together or several crossings had to occur over time. This makes the accident even more extraordinary. Perhaps a natural raft carried an entire social group. Early humans often lived close to relatives and moved together. A flood or tsunami could have swept adults and children from the same camp onto a broad platform of vegetation. Perhaps arrivals happened more than once. Severe storms, volcanic collapses, earthquakes, and tsunamis are common in the Indonesian archipelago. Across thousands of years, repeated disasters could have thrown multiple groups across the straits. Most vanished without a trace. A few may have survived long enough to meet others. When the castaways finally reached Flores, they entered a strange island ecosystem. The land was volcanic and rugged. Fresh water existed, but it could be seasonal and difficult to find. Food sources were unfamiliar. The island was home to giant rats, large reptiles, and dwarf relatives of elephants called stegodon. Komodo dragons and other powerful predators made the landscape dangerous. The newcomers had no stored grain, no livestock, and no metal. They had only their bodies, their social knowledge, and the ability to make sharp edges from stone. Those simple tools were enough to transform survival. A flake could cut meat-slice plants, sharpen wood, and process animal skin. A heavy stone could break bones for marrow. Knowledge passed between group members may have mattered more than any single object. The first days would have been desperate. Survivors needed fresh water immediately. They needed shade-safe sleeping places and food that could be collected without great risk. Shellfish crabs, roots-fruit insects, and small animals may have kept them alive before they learned the island's deeper rhythms. Over generations, the strangers became islanders. Isolation changed them. Large animals that reach islands often become smaller because food is limited and predators may be fewer. Small animals sometimes become larger when competition changes. Evolution on islands can produce forms found nowhere else on Earth. Humans were not exempt. The ancient people of Flores became remarkably small. The Mata Menge fossils belong to individuals with small jaws and teeth. Hundreds of thousands of years later, Homo floresiensis stood only about 1 meter tall, with a small brain and a unique mixture of primitive and more recent anatomical features. Scientists still debate the exact family history of these island humans. They may have descended from Homo erectus and become smaller after long isolation. Another possibility is that they descended from an even more primitive human lineage. But whichever explanation is correct, their presence tells us that an ancient crossing succeeded. The ocean did not merely carry a few terrified survivors to a beach. It created an isolated human world that endured for hundreds of thousands of years. This changes how we think about early humans. For a long time, complex sea travel was considered a recent achievement, requiring modern intelligence language planning and advanced tools. The Flores evidence shows that deep water barriers were crossed much earlier than once believed. But we should not turn the event into a modern expedition. There may have been no brave captain scanning the horizon, no group meeting to choose a destination, no launch ceremony, no vessel designed for a journey. The first successful crossing may have begun with panic, a wall of water, a collapsing forest, a family holding on to branches while the land disappeared. Their achievement was not navigation, it was survival. Much later, modern humans crossed the seas of Wallacea on the way to New Guinea and Australia. Those journeys, tens of thousands of years ago, almost certainly required more deliberate voyaging. Reaching the continent of Sahel involved repeated open water crossings, some across distances where the destination may not have been visible. By then, humans likely had watercraft, stronger planning abilities, and traditions of maritime knowledge. But the ancient settlement of Flores belonged to a far earlier chapter. It reminds us that exploration does not always begin with intention. Sometimes, a species enters a new world because nature gives it no choice. A storm can become a migration. A disaster can become a founding event. A handful of survivors can become an entire branch of humanity. Today, the tools from Flores look modest. They are pieces of stone with sharp edges, easily overlooked by an untrained eye. But their location makes them extraordinary. Each one is evidence of an impossible journey. Before ships, before sails, before maps, and perhaps before anything we would recognize as a boat, early humans crossed a deep ocean barrier. They reached an island beyond the edge of their world, adapted to its dangers, and remained there long enough for evolution to reshape their bodies. We may never know the names of the first people who arrived. We may never know whether they crossed on a forest torn apart by a tsunami, a platform of bamboo, or a crude raft made by their own hands. But the stones they left behind tell us one thing with certainty. The ocean did not stop them. And on the far side of that water, a new human story began.